On a warm spring morning in the small coastal town of Carmel by the Sea, California, I, Richard Bennett, 74 years old, a former aerospace engineer, sat on my front porch, a cup of strong black coffee in hand, my eyes staring out at the ocean. The waves beat steadily like the heartbeat of time, and I suddenly remembered the fateful trip that changed the way I looked at aging and travel. That year, I had just turned 70. My wife, Linda, had always dreamed of visiting Rome, where she had studied art when she was young. Thinking, I'm still healthy, why not? I booked a 3-week trip through Europe. The itinerary was packed, from Italy to France to the Netherlands. Luxurious hotels, attentive tour guides, but there was one thing I had not prepared for: my body, which was no longer that of a 40-year-old. On my third day in Rome, climbing the steps of the Colosseum, I felt my heart pounding, then a sharp pain spreading across my left chest. Sweat poured out despite the cool weather. Linda called an ambulance in a panic, and I was rushed to the nearest hospital. They diagnosed me with mild angina, but the Italian doctor shook his head when he learned that I had no international insurance. Everything from hospital bills to medications were in euros, and exorbitantly expensive. Since then, I have begun to think seriously about the potential dangers that seniors face when they board seemingly harmless flights and trains. What I am about to share is not only my own story, but also a gentle but necessary reminder to anyone over 70 who still has a passion for exploration in their hearts. There are 5 things I wish I had known better before packing my bags that year. Each one comes with a price tag, not just in money, but in health, peace, and sometimes even the dignity of old age. And remember, if you or someone you know has been through something similar, feel free to share your story in the comments below. Maybe your story can be a valuable lesson for someone else who is preparing for the journey. And if you found this content helpful, please hit the subscribe and like buttons so we can continue to bring informative and emotional videos to the senior community in the United States. Now, let me take you through the first memory and lesson that I believe can help you avoid a regrettable trip. Because sometimes it is not the distance that makes us hesitate, but the seemingly small things that can create unpredictable consequences. I used to think that my health was still good enough to travel. I still walked every morning, ate moderately, and had no serious chronic diseases. But that trip to Europe taught me a lesson that I have not forgotten. Health in your 70s is no longer something you can take for granted. You know, back home, everything is familiar: the family doctor, the pharmacy, the streets you've walked 1,000 times. But when you're in a foreign land, everything changes in your body. It becomes a gamble. We thought that cruising was the easiest way to travel. No moving, food served at your door, scenery that changes every day. But no one told us that the humidity at sea could aggravate Linda's arthritis, and no one mentioned that the change in atmospheric pressure when the ship sails into deep water could affect my blood pressure. My good friend James had a similar experience. He is 74 years old and lives in Austin, Texas, and loves adventure. Last year, he decided to go to Peru to conquer Machu Picchu, a dream destination for many people. But the 2,400 meters above sea level is no joke. After only half a day of traveling, James felt dizzy, had a racing heart, and collapsed while climbing. He ended up in the hospital for 3 days just to stabilize his blood pressure. And it's not just heart problems or pressure. Small changes like weather, time zones, eating habits, all can put the elderly body into overdrive. Linda's friend, Gloria, of Sarasota, Florida, nearly died from a glass of ice water at a restaurant in Bangkok. Her digestive system couldn't adapt to the local bacteria, leading to acute diarrhea and severe dehydration. You see, what for young people is just a small inconvenience, for us, those of us who are over 70, sometimes represents the border between a memorable vacation and a terrible accident. What haunts me the most is the moment sitting on the stretcher in Rome, not understanding what the doctor said, Linda crying and calling the U.S., and me feeling helpless. I'm not telling you this to scare you. I'm telling you this to prepare you. If you're planning on going somewhere, start with a comprehensive medical checkup. Don't just check your blood pressure. Ask your doctor about the potential risks of long-haul flights, how your body might react to high altitudes, and whether your medications are available in your destination. And most importantly, buy travel insurance that covers medical expenses abroad, especially emergency medical evacuation. If I could go back in time to before I boarded that flight, I wouldn't have canceled my trip, but I would have prepared differently. I would have brought a copy of my medical records. I would have asked about medical facilities near my hotel, and I would never have left the country without knowing whether my insurance would be valid where I was going. And if you're watching this video, I want you to stop for a minute, grab a pen and paper, and write down 3 questions. 1. Am I healthy enough to really enjoy the trip? 2. If I have a medical problem, where will I get care? 3. What does my insurance cover? If you can answer those 3 questions clearly, you're halfway there. Because traveling at this age isn't about proving your youth. It's about learning to protect your freedom with the wisdom of experience. In the next part, I will tell you about a very easy-to-overlook danger, the invisible bacteria that you can bring back from just a handshake, an elevator button, or a glass of juice in the morning at the hotel. You may be well prepared, passport, medicine, suitcase rolled up, but there's one thing many people forget until it's too late: their immune system. After 70, the body doesn't respond the same way it used to. A cold, a mild fever that a young person might get over in 2 days can leave an older person bedridden for weeks, even hospitalized. I remember a trip to New York in the winter. Linda and I were only planning to visit our granddaughter for a few days. It was a short domestic trip, and I wasn't too worried. But that day, JFK Airport was packed with people, coughing, sneezing, and hardly anyone wearing masks. 3 days later, Linda had a high fever, was coughing non-stop, and ended up in the emergency room with pneumonia. It turns out that just a few droplets of the virus in the air were enough to knock out a woman who was otherwise very healthy. It's not just the air. In hotels, the central air conditioning runs constantly. Doorknobs, TV remotes, elevator buttons, all are places that hundreds of hands touch every day. You see, bacteria can live on metal or plastic surfaces for more than 24 hours. I'm not a clean freak, but since then, I've always carried a small spray bottle of disinfectant and a box of antibacterial wipes. Food and water in unfamiliar places are especially dangerous. Gloria, my old friend from Florida, is still haunted by the experience of food poisoning in Thailand. A single plate of spring rolls at a local restaurant, nothing unusual about them, left her severely dehydrated and with 5 days of diarrhea. She said she returned home from that trip with 7 pounds under her belt and a week of IV fluids. One thing that many people don't realize is that older adults are more susceptible to dehydration because their thirst sensation is less acute. We may not drink enough water during long trips, especially if we're worried about having to use a public restroom. But the truth is, dehydration is one of the leading causes of fatigue, dizziness, falls, and increased susceptibility to infection. Another time, on a cruise from Miami to the Bahamas, I met an elderly couple named Harold and Annie. They were 82 and 79 years old. One evening, they both suffered from severe diarrhea after a seafood buffet. Although there was a doctor on board, medicine was limited. They had to stay in their cabin for the last 3 days of the trip. Harold later said something I will never forget. "I only wish I had brought my own Pepto-Bismol and bottled water." My advice? Don't underestimate the little things. Carry bottled water, eat cooked food, avoid salads washed in local water, and always wash your hands after touching handrails, doors, or buttons. For me, antibacterial wipes and a small portable water bottle are more valuable than an expensive watch. And finally, if you're planning on traveling abroad, ask your doctor about what vaccines you should get before your trip, especially if you're going to a place with a high risk of travelers' diarrhea, viral fever, or pneumonia. At this age, resistance is no longer an iron fence. But with careful preparation, you can make your body safer in a world full of unseen things. Next, I'll tell you about what many people consider the most exciting part of traveling, but which, as it turns out, is the one that knocks out many older people: the lingering fatigue after the journey. I used to think, just get enough rest and everything will be fine. But then I realized, what takes young people overnight can take us weeks. The body of a 70-year-old doesn't recharge like a 20-year-old. Linda's trip to Japan was a case in point. We flew from San Francisco to Tokyo, a nearly 12-hour flight. Then came a packed itinerary: ancient shrines, cherry blossoms, tea ceremony classes. Beautiful, but also utterly exhausting. I remember the second day, Linda suddenly stopped talking during breakfast. She just stared out the window, her eyes dark. I asked her why, and she just shook her head. "This doesn't feel like a vacation anymore, Rich. I just want to go home." I was no better. Even though I was used to long-distance travel, that time I was so jet-lagged that I couldn't sleep for 3 nights. When the body doesn't get enough rest, the mind becomes foggy. I dropped my phone at the train station without realizing it, and didn't realize it until the afternoon. Linda had to take me back to the hotel like a caretaker. It took us almost 3 weeks to recover from that trip. 3 weeks just to get back to normal. Not because of illness, but because of fatigue. And during those days, I thought a lot about the concept of retreat travel. Could it be that at some point, travel becomes a race against one's own endurance? My neighbors, Walter and Diane, had a similar experience. They took a 10-day tour of Europe, visiting a different city each day. Walter told me, "I felt like I was doing a marathon on the bus. I got on in the morning, got off in the afternoon, ate quickly, looked around quickly, took pictures quickly, and then continued." For people over 70, fatigue is more than just a feeling. It affects balance, mood, and even the immune system. A sleepless night can make us more likely to fall, more irritable, more susceptible to infection. Everything slows down, from our heart rate to our reflexes. I'm not saying we should stop traveling, but maybe we need to relearn how to travel. Instead of trying to cram a lot of destinations into a week, choose a quiet place and stay there long enough to really appreciate it. Instead of a crowded package tour, plan a light itinerary, with breaks in between. One thing I learned: always take at least 1 full day off for every 2 days of sightseeing. Wherever I stay, I try to book a hotel near a park or beach, where I can sit, close my eyes, and just listen to the wind. I'm also no longer afraid to bring a neck pillow, eye mask, and white headphones, no matter how much people laugh at me. Linda always carries a small mat to stretch on in her hotel room every morning. Keeping your body awake isn't about caffeine, it's about listening to it, she says. Do you know what I brought back from that journey was not a souvenir, but a lesson? If you don't make room for rest, travel will no longer be a vacation. It will be a challenge that your body may not be able to overcome. And then, after fatigue, comes something worse: the risk of falling and injury. In the next chapter, I will share heartbreaking stories about seemingly small falls, but the consequences are not small at all for the elderly like us. I used to think falling was a small thing, until I witnessed a fall that took away the youth of a close friend. It happened on a trip to Spain with an old friend named Charles. We met at a retirement club in San Diego. He was 76 years old, a former history teacher, tall, deep-voiced, and polite. Charles used to lead morning walks in the neighborhood, fitter and more flexible than many people his age. The trip that day included a stop in Granada, a beautiful old city with cobblestone streets and steep stairs. Charles had just stepped out of the old church of Santa Anna when he twisted his foot on a raised stone. The fall seemed simple, but when I ran to catch him, his face was ashen, and he couldn't get up. At the hospital, doctors diagnosed him with a broken hip. Worse, they said he needed hip replacement surgery and would be in hospital for at least 10 days. Charles, my strong and active friend, was confined to a wheelchair for the entire flight back to the U.S., and although he recovered well, he admitted that the fall had completely destroyed his confidence in going out. We old people do not recover as well as young people. A fall not only hurts, but it also upsets our mental balance. It brings fear of walking, fear of traveling, fear of our own bodies betraying us. My wife Linda also almost fell at the floating market in Bangkok. The road was slippery from the rain, and the soft-soled slippers that seemed convenient turned out to be a danger. I managed to catch her, but I will never forget the look of panic on her face. Since then, Linda has always carried a folding walking stick and sturdy-soled shoes wherever she goes. I once read a statistic that made me shudder. Every 11 seconds in the United States, an older adult is injured in a fall, and more than 95% of hip fractures in older adults are caused by falls. Not because they are frail or weak, but because of unfamiliar surroundings, slippery surfaces, poor street lighting, or simply being tired after a long day. If you have a walking stick, use it. If you feel tired, rest. Don't be afraid of what others think of you as weak, because stability is not about walking straight, but about knowing when to stop. I always carry bandages, heating pads, and pain cream in my suitcase, not to be pessimistic, but to be proactive. I also learned to book hotels on the ground floor or where there is a working elevator. Don't take the stairs when you can take an elevator, and don't walk in dark neighborhoods without streetlights. Walter, the neighbor I mentioned in the previous chapter, once said a very good sentence. Old age does not take away legs, it takes away subjectivity. And that's what makes me more careful when I travel. Don't wear pants that are too loose. Don't wear new shoes that haven't been tried on properly. And always look carefully at the road before stepping. Now, let me tell you something even more dangerous than falling: the financial pitfalls that lurk for seniors on the road. From invalid health insurance to sophisticated scams. I vividly remember Linda's pale face as she looked at her credit card statement after our Caribbean trip last year. It wasn't because we'd overspent. It was because of an odd hotel deal in Jamaica that cost nearly $1,500. We have never been to Jamaica. It turned out that when I swiped my card at the front desk of a small resort in St. Lucia, my card details had been copied. Someone had used it to book a luxury room, and if they hadn't caught it, they would have spent a lot more. Luckily, the bank blocked the card in time, but I still remember the feeling of confusion and helplessness in a strange place, when my hard-earned money was at risk of evaporating just because of a moment of carelessness. I'm not the only one who's been in this situation. Harold, a friend I met on a cruise years ago, told me he was tricked into booking a tour through a website that looked professional and had a great deal. But when he got there, no one knew about the booking. He lost more than $700. The truth is, we seniors are easy targets for scammers. They know we're not tech-savvy, don't check apps or websites, and tend to trust people who speak to us in a gentle, polite way. These traps are everywhere. Unmetered taxis, wrong-price money changers, fake hotel staff, or people who flirt with us and steal our belongings. Another financial risk that many people don't consider is travel insurance. Many of my friends think that Medicare will cover them when they go abroad, but the reality is, Medicare is almost never effective abroad. If you don't buy a supplement, you could be out tens of thousands of dollars if you have an accident in Europe or Asia. Charles, the friend I mentioned in the previous chapter, had to pay an advance of more than 9,000 euros for surgery after his fall in Granada. He had insurance, but it was the cheapest kind, and it did not cover emergency transportation. They wanted another $20,000 to fly him back to the U.S. on a medical plane. The family had to borrow money from their pension fund to get him home. I learned one thing. If you want to travel, you can't afford to skimp on travel insurance. It has to include international medical expenses, trip cancellation, lost luggage, and most importantly, emergency medical evacuation back home. It might cost a few $100s, but you're buying peace of mind and a life. I also never carry a lot of cash with me. I use a card with instant transaction notification. I keep valuables in the hotel safe and always photocopy my passport and credit cards and save them to my personal email in case of theft. I told Linda, "If anyone asks for your card information or asks to re-swipe, never do it before asking me." She laughed, but did. And I know that vigilance has saved us many times. When I get home, I double-check my bills. I call my bank when in doubt. And I've learned to say no, even when someone offers an exclusive handmade item or a today-only spa treatment. A beautiful journey begins with safety. And safety does not come from the kindness of others, but from our own preparation, alertness, and initiative. After all that I've just mentioned, the unexpected pains, the hidden germs, the silent fatigue, the unexpected falls, and the money lost without a chance to say goodbye, you're probably wondering, should I still go? I asked myself that question once. One gloomy afternoon at the Seattle airport, as I waited for Linda to return from the airport medical office after a bout of dizziness, I sat watching the people hurrying by, my heart heavy. But then a boy ran by, passport in hand, shouting, "Grandpa, we're going to Paris!" I looked at that boy and remembered, the reason we travel is not to escape old age, but to embrace the last memories of life. Travel, not to prove that we are still strong, but to prove that our hearts still want to see the world. So I'm not saying don't go. I'm just saying, go like someone who has fallen and learned how to get up. Bring your meds, but not your fears. Bring your schedule, but also leave room for lazy mornings. Bring your insurance, but also be grateful that you still have the strength to pack your bags and go. If you have had a mishap while traveling or have a loved one who has had a similar experience, please leave a comment below. We are not alone in this journey, and maybe your story will help others better prepare for their next trip. If you find this video helpful, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends and family, especially those who are preparing for their first trip after 70. Because when we learn together, old age is no longer a barrier, but a journey worth living. I am Richard, a man who has lived for 74 years and still has the thirst for discovery, and I will continue to travel, only I will travel with a backpack full of experience, a heart full of caution, and a smile wide enough to welcome the world, albeit a little more slowly. See you in the next videos, where we will continue to talk about how to live fully in old age, not just to survive, but to truly live. Remember to subscribe and share with your friends, so you don't miss out on any stories or tutorials in the next video.